Good morning. Good morning. Another account-based Friday, and we've got a special guest joining us from Massachusetts today, Jen Shapiro from Unbound B2B, and we're going to talk all things sales and marketing. It's very unusual to have a sales leader or someone with a sales background on our weekly get-together with my co-host, Meg Hewer. We're really excited to have Jen. We'll give her a formal introduction in a moment. Before we jump in, if you look, and I'm not going to point because I realize that as I point, I'm pointing to the opposite side of the screen. My camera does a weird reverse image, but in the upper right corner, if you have questions about best practices of go-to-market or go-to-market questions, you can like and subscribe just by simply clicking on or using the QR code in the upper right corner of the screen. It'll bring you right to the 200 plus videos. Of course, if you have a specific question that you have to get answered, we're happy to answer that as well. So you don't have to sort through the 200 videos, but there's a lot of great content out there. Each week we start off with a poll, and this week is no different. And this week we asked a question around account-based, or a correction, around sales and marketing alignment, and kind of what has been the recent temperature check. And what inspired me, besides our guest, who's going to be covering this today, but what inspired me to shrink it down to 6 months is it's been a really challenging selling environment the last 6 months, regardless of what company that you're in or what service that you're selling. So I kind of wanted to do a temperature check on, are things improving? Are they deteriorating? Are they staying the same? I had voted no change because it's really hard for me to quantifiably say the needle has moved. But I'd say by and large, and we had 14 votes, not a ton of votes, but the majority came through and said it actually deteriorated. So Meg, did you have a point of view on this one?
I did. I was in the deteriorated camp, and it pains me to have to vote that way, but I've been doing a number of discussions with go-to-market leaders over the last few weeks, and I'm hearing some issues. We're definitely hearing that sales is under a ton of pressure right now to deliver revenue, in particular in the SaaS world, in some pretty challenging selling environments. And as a result, one of the unfortunately easy things to do is say, hey, marketing, you're not holding up your end of the bargain. But often it goes back to the fact that perhaps marketing and sales haven't appropriately aligned around their target customers, around what they really need from the kinds of contacts they want sourced by marketing, and the quality of what is coming from marketing. We need to own that too. So for all of these reasons, I think we've seen, unfortunately, a little bit of a dip in the relationship. But that's why I am very, very excited that we have Jen Shapiro here today. It's been my pleasure to have worked alongside Jen for a number of years at SiriusDecisions and Forrester. And I can say, Jen, you and I did many a sales call together.
We did.
And it was a delight, really, because Jen's got such a customer-focused way of engaging with her clients and really thinking strategically about those relationships, but not just with her clients, also with her internal counterparts in the rest of the go-to-market environment, whether that's marketing, customer success, really anywhere else she needs to be connecting. So we are learning from the best today. Jen, congratulations on your recent move to Unbound B2B. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days and what you think of our poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Meg and John. It's great to have you. So as you mentioned, just landed at Unbound B2B and leading sales and account management and growth for their North America region. And I think in terms of the poll, when I think about it, do I feel that the marketing and sales alignment has changed as a result of the macroeconomic factors? I would hope not, right? And I think now more than ever, given the economy, macroeconomic factors, all the pressures, Meg, that you just talked about, it's even more important for the go-to-market functions to be aligned, right? As you said, it's a really hard selling environment. There have been layoffs, budget cuts. Companies are being so much more judicious in their purchases. Everybody's being asked to do more with less, and it's really, really tough. And so sales, marketing, and product need to be in lockstep around who they're targeting, as you mentioned, right? The unique value prop how are they competing against competitors, and what is the UVP and the differentiation, right? And is that landing? Is it resonating? Is it enough to move the needle to displace an incumbent, to land that new logo? And there's a lot around, demand generation and account-based marketing efforts. With that said, in the last few roles I've had, and the one that I'm in now, I wouldn't say that the alignment has changed for me personally. But I'm not surprised on the poll. And I think the shift has been more so on the focus rather than the alignment in my case, right? So for example, so many companies lost clients during COVID, right? It's been a tough couple years, tough couple months. The goals are continuing to increase. And so either losing the entire account spend or the spend was downgraded, right? And, we all know that CAC is higher for new logos than it is for existing companies. So, I'm finding sales and marketing teams who can align on the priority on, what do we need to do in the next 6 months to get to our goals, and how are we going to prioritize and focus, and sales, marketing, product, and customer success partnering together to retain the install base and grow them. And then also I'm seeing a focus on winning back the customers that were lost over the last couple of years. But it's hard to see and sad to see, but I have seen it a little bit about the deterioration. I think if the teams can come together and align on the focus, I think that will help the relationship a little bit better.
That makes a ton of sense. And it really does all begin with being on the same page about what you're trying to do and what each team can contribute. And kind of on that front, you've got a unique vantage point right now of having recently started a new role. And I would imagine one of the first things you thought about was how you can collaborate effectively with your counterparts and the rest of the go-to-market functions. Tell us a little bit about the advice that you would offer both to sales leaders and to marketing leaders to make sure that when a new leader comes in, they are on the same page and they are speaking the same language so that they can deliver impact quickly.
Yeah, great question. There's a few things. So I'm a little biased coming from SiriusDecisions, given that was, what our entire company tried to do is help sales, marketing, and product align more tightly. But the data can't be argued with. So, the research shows that companies with tightly aligned sales and marketing teams achieve 24% faster 3-year revenue growth and 27% faster 3-year profit growth than those without tight alignment. So for me, good relationship and a collaborative relationship with marketing is table stakes. I'm quite sure I'm preaching to the choir here on the value of alignment. And unfortunately, it's easier said than done, right? And, one tip is, how do you keep it simple? Having good relationships and making an impact quickly across the go-to-market function doesn't need to be complicated, right? It's not easy, but it can be simple. And I think it starts with shared goals, trust, and communication at the executive level on down. And so, as we talk about the deteriorating relationship and just, the challenges and decreased budget and increased goals, just some of those stats I think are incredibly powerful on tight alignment is something that we have control over. And a lot of that is relationship and process. So, I'll pause there for a second, but I do have, a couple thoughts and ideas, Meg, on your question about just impact for faster roles.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective of kind of keeping it simple and maybe just kind of flipping that model on its ear. What do you see, whether maybe in your experience of being a sales leader or observing other companies, what do you see as headwinds that might prevent companies from that collaboration? Headwinds in terms of what potentially could be removed to get to that good relationship that you mentioned?
Yeah, great question. So, I think part of it is just assuming positive intent, right? And I think sometimes people just move so quickly or assume the worst or don't even take the time to think about it one way or the other. So I think if you can remove any type of preconceived ill notion, right, and assume positive intent, that helps. So building relationships is so important. We're all people. You spend so much more time with your colleagues than you do with your family. So just getting to know your marketing colleagues, your product colleagues, when you start, and understanding them as people, right? Just getting to know them a little bit, and, what are their goals and objectives? What does success look like for them? How can I help them be successful and get to their goal? And I think if you can learn more a little bit about somebody as a human and what good looks like for them and what they care about, then I think they do that in return, and it helps, right? So, what's working now, what's not working, how are you currently engaging with sales, and what can we do better, and what's working. So I think that's one piece. Another piece of advice I have is just be curious. It's okay to ask questions. I had a mentor a long time ago. We were in the car for 5 hours driving up to visit some clients, and he'd managed teams of over 1,000 salespeople, and I had asked him and said, hey, what is the number one trait that you look for, right, in a leader and a salesperson? And I was expecting grit, tenacity, something like that. And he said, being curious. Whether you are arrogant or you're too nervous and timid to ask the question, the day you stop asking questions is the day you stop learning and growing. So if you're new, there's an assumption you were hired for a reason, right? There's an assumption that you're bringing experience and perspective, but there's also a lot to learn. Sales and marketing can help one another. Don't be afraid to ask. I think there's two more points that I'll mention in terms of just headwinds to avoid and, tips on having an impact. So the next one is, where are we going in the next 6 to 12 months, right? John, I like your point that you looked at the last 6 months and you narrowed that down for a reason. I would say if you're new coming in, breaking down a barrier of ambiguity or not being on the same page. So what is the focus in the next 6 to 12 months? And prioritizing across sales, marketing, and product on what that focus is, so that there's probably not enough time or resources to do everything, right? And you need to be on the same page in terms of what's going to move the needle. So if you're a new marketing leader coming in, or new sales leader, a new product leader, being on that page with your counterparts is really important, because then you can be aligned and create a joint plan of attack. And I think downstream, sometimes there's a lot of friction between sales and marketing in terms of who does what, or the handoff, or what's being delivered or received, right? And if you can align and everybody has their swim lanes, how they're going to all work together is really important. And then the last piece I'd say on this front is just being inclusive. It's really, really simple, but sometimes you just don't think of it. And sales and marketing teams that I've seen work really tightly together, they have their counterparts on all their meetings, right? So if you think about your weekly sales leadership meeting, your quarterly business reviews, kickoffs, right? It used to be called sales kickoff. Now, often it's a revenue kickoff. And if you could have your sales counterpart, your marketing, and your product counterparts, right? Having them in the room provides transparency, collaboration, understanding. So those are some of the things that I'd say I've seen work really well if you're, coming into a role, trying to make an impact quickly, trying to get up to speed, figure out what's working, who people are, and what you need to do, and how you can work together to be successful.
Jen, I love your advice for joining each other's meetings. I think there's such value in that. And I would say for any marketing leaders who aren't joining their, typically weekly sales meetings or whatever the frequency is, make sure you do get invited, and have people on your team get invited too. Sometimes just having the leader there isn't as good as having, a broader team, and it's an hour well spent. Jen, actually, this is relevant to a question that just came in. For ABM, how do you view measurement, joint go-to-market goals for the revenue team, or individual metrics per team? Would love to have you comment on Lauren's question. It's a really good one. But I was also going to ask, when you have marketing share reporting with you or with your sales team, because we want to be mutually accountable for delivering results for the things we're supposed to do. I'd be curious to know, to your keep it simple point, what is the handful of KPIs or metrics you would want to see from marketing in your regular sales meetings that they should be prepared to share, to say, here's how it's going, and what can we do better or differently, or more of. But happy for you to, if you want to weigh in on Lauren's question, and then maybe tackle mine, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Lauren. I think the first piece is, what decisions are you going to make off the information you're gathering, right? Because I've seen so many times there's just so many reports and so much data, and it just keeps getting piled on and compounded on. And, there's never enough time to go through all the slides or all the content. And there's all these dashboards in the CRM about what's important. So I would say the first thing is always, what are we going to do with this information, right? And I think whether it's demand gen overall, and then in Lauren's question, the ABM efforts, I think it's figuring out, where are we trying to move the needle? So, one metric that's really helpful is, number of inbound leads, right? So, marketing now is contributing to the sales pipeline and has been for a while. And so what does that look like, right? And then how are they converting? So are those leads, converting throughout the funnel? And if not, why and why not? And those are really helpful to understand, okay, is the volume there of marketing's contribution to the funnel? Are those leads converting? And then the acceptance, right? So are the sales team accepting them and following up on them, like the SLA says they should and they need to be. So that's really helpful. And I think ABM just has been so important with, growing and expanding existing accounts. And then also I mentioned earlier, win back, right? So that's something, that what I'm doing now at Unbound that a lot of our clients are doing is how can we, target a very specific ICP that we're going after that we think we can, have a much higher propensity to win. So, I think it's looking at the top of the funnel, right? At, what is the awareness? Do these companies know who we are? And are they open to engaging with us? And then I think it's, are we making traction within these accounts? So depending on if they're new logos or depending on if they're install base, maybe it's number of either leads or introductions within those accounts into the pipeline, right? Or it could be growth for the existing install base, if it's an ABM focus. So, I think those are the couple pieces there, I think at the top of it that I would really want to be able to see. And then depending on what your clients, not your clients, but what your needs are and what you're trying to accomplish, there's probably a couple metrics under those KPIs that you might want to look at depending on your specific situation. But I think those are some of the high level ones I'd look at.
And then in terms of Lauren's question, this is an interesting one. We explored this with a couple of guests in terms of are go-to-market goals shared goals, or do you need to really look at the separate contributions of sales and marketing? Lauren, hopefully I'm interpreting your question correctly. What are your thoughts on whether we're looking at the same pipeline goal? Is there value? It sounds like you're seeing value in breaking it down in terms of at least some understanding of what comes from marketing versus what sales is sourcing on its own, but I'm curious to get your take on that.
Is it a cop-out to say both? So, I think it's really helpful to have shared goals. And part of that is that starts at the executive level, right? Whether it's an EBITDA goal or a revenue goal or a growth goal or whatever it might be, right? But for sales and marketing at the executive level, to have the same goals. And then that breaks down a little bit functionally, right? So is there a field marketing goal for pipeline contribution? Is there a demand gen goal, an ABM goal, right? So you unpack it a little bit as you move down into the organization. But where I've seen the breakdown happen sometimes is that when there aren't shared goals, that creates a lot of friction, which might lead to the deteriorated relationship we saw in the poll. But it could lead to some friction on how each of the groups are contributing and how the teams work together to make that happen, right? So you want your demand gen and field marketing counterparts to be in lockstep with the BDR team, with the new business team, with the growth team on what we're trying to accomplish and who's doing what, right? And how are we all working together to achieve those goals? And I think that helps alleviate any conflicting priorities and friction sometimes on who owns what, and sometimes squabbling, amongst the teams, which is never great. So I think at the highest level, shared goals are really important. And then it is helpful at some point to break it down on source, right? So is an inbound lead sourced by marketing? Is it sourced by the BDR, by the rep? And then, conversion throughout the funnel. And I think for me anyway, that's less of a finger pointing and more just about okay, what can we learn? How can we be more efficient? Are the leads that are being generated by the marketing team converting at a higher rate, right? Maybe there's some branding and display and programmatic that they're layering into the top. And so those leads are coming in a lot more qualified and a lot warmer than, the cold outreach coming from the BDR, the new business rep. But essentially, again, like I said, it's less finger pointing and more, what can we learn and where can we point our resources and how can we capitalize on what we're getting? So share it at the top. And then I think it's helpful to break it down a little bit, as you get into the funnel and the pipeline and in the specific teams.
Amen on all of that. I violently agree with how you're saying it. And it's a little bit different. Like I get really passionate about this topic. I recently was at a conference where there was an industry leader saying, oh, we should abandon the source side of marketing altogether. And where I got hung up on that was exactly what you just said about what can we learn and where do we spend our time? Like your time as a seller is so valuable and so precious. Without the data of understanding, is it marketing sourced? Is it sales? Is it partner? Is it PLG? and we could have a whole session on this altogether, but I think what I netted out to is where does sales spend their time based on that data. It's not to your point, it's not the finger pointing. And I think a lot of marketers, we kind of have the finger pointing mentality of, hey, we sourced all this. That's not really the question or how to look at it. It's really to look at it more broadly so we can figure out where does sales spend their time. Is it on the inbound? Is it on the outbound? Anyway, I could go on that. But you had mentioned something, you mentioned a bunch of interesting things there, but one of the things that you had mentioned was kind of the going back on the customer side of things and some of the challenges that you're seeing in terms of targeting. If I heard you right, it sounded like you were doing some ICP work on existing customers and maybe upselling or cross-selling. Could you share any kind of insights or trends that you're seeing there with your clients that are looking at that or doing that kind of analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think keeping the customer at the center of everything you're doing is really, really important. And Megan, this will sound familiar because I learned it from Rich Eldon, John Neeson at SiriusDecisions, and all the decisions that we made as an organization, keeping the customer at the center was thinking about what's best for the customer first, your company second, and yourself third, right? And that really helps across all the different components, right? So as the go-to-market function is prioritizing resources, initiatives, and when needed, just being consistent on decision making, during tougher, sticky situations. And I think in terms of, John, what you were just asking about and the, focus on the ICP and the customer, it really is looking at, who are the segments that our solution can really, really have an impact on? Because most companies can sell to a lot of people, right? But where are we going to move the needle? What is the ICP that we have the highest propensity to win, and starting there and then snowballing out a bit. So looking at, whether it's the existing install base and where we're looking to grow, or win back customers. But I think there's a lot in terms of just keeping it focused on the customer, looking at growth marketing, customer success, and how you can partner together with the product team on, pricing, packaging, UVP, all of those pieces that really align to helping the customer. Because at the end of the day, I like to look at it and say to my customers, we want to be a long-term partner. We want to help you look like a rock star, and understanding what they care about and their priorities is going to help you do that as a company, right? So when I think about sales and marketing alignment and what ICP to focus on, it's what is it that we need from a messaging standpoint, from a product standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, to help our clients solve their business challenges and help them grow, and then we grow along with them. And as we land and expand, that's how we expand once we land afterwards. So, I think that's been the focus on the ICP work, on the install base work, and keeping the customer front and center.
Yeah, all really, really good advice. And I love that reminder about Rich and John's, customer first, company second, you third. I think those are words to live by for sure. So thinking about the expansion piece of that puzzle, I think you mentioned early on, and I agree, is that a lot of organizations are not just trying to win back customers they lost, but also trying to grow with the customers they have. That usually turns into a sticky area for marketing because they have sort of less access or less insight into those existing relationships. Have you seen marketing play a meaningful role there? And that's a little bit of a loaded question because I know we both have, but let me ask it a different way. What kinds of things would you recommend marketing leaders and teams think about to help in that expansion category?
Yeah, great question, because I think that's a big focus on how companies, we're not in a spend at all costs environment right now, right? And we have to be really diligent and really mindful, and expansion is a great way to do that. So there's a couple different ways. We mentioned ABM in a few different parts of this conversation. I think the account-based marketing piece is big. I also think account planning. And so what I've seen a lot of my clients do, and what I've done in almost all the roles that I've been in, is looking at account plans and who are the existing customers that we're looking to grow, right? And how are we working with them today? What are their priorities? Where are there areas in their business that we can grow? Is it other business units? Is it other regions? Is it other departments, right? So where specifically are we helping today? Where specifically is that growth? And then, maybe there's some targeted ABM, right? Maybe there's some awareness that we could use that would help. Maybe there's executive pull-in that we have with the CMO, right, to help with that account, depending on, if it's a priority account for the company. Another one is customer references, case studies, and testimonials, right? So within the install base and down the funnel, I think marketing can have a huge impact. Maybe it isn't just handing over leads, but using those case studies and references is really, really helpful to get in the door to other parts of the organization, and then just to show them the solution alignment and the value proposition, right, that we have. So I think that's helpful. And then one thing that the head of marketing at the company I'm at now recently asked me was, hey, we just, created a new pitch deck. You're on the front lines, can you give me feedback? And I think to extrapolate that comment and that situation to what your question was, Meg, is, the messaging that we have, the conversations that we're having, sharing bi-directional feedback with marketing on what's resonating, what some of the pushback is, what some of the questions are, the hesitation, and having a conversation internally with marketing about what's resonating, what's not, what's needed to win the client and get them over the line to join or expand the relationship is really helpful for marketing then to partner together with sales on what is the messaging, what is the content, what is the collateral needed, to help throughout the sales cycle, particularly in an expansion situation.
Yeah. 1,000 times yes to that, Jen. Thank you. Really great suggestions. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. And just my last question, because we're brushing up against the bottom of the hour here. And that was all great advice, Jen. If you had to give one actionable thing or activity for either a sales or a marketing leader to go back with today to get that alignment that you talked about, what's that one thing that you would suggest that they do that they may not be doing otherwise?
Yeah, that's tough because I think all these things are important. I would say the one actionable thing that I would say everybody should go do if they haven't is go sit down with your counterpart and ask them in the next 6 months, what is critical for you to accomplish? And what do you need my help on to get there? Right. And I think there's a lot of assumptions that are made and there's a lot of moving parts and people can become reactive because there's so much going on and you need to take that time to be strategic and proactive. So I think just circling back and level setting on, there's a bunch of noise, there's a bunch of things that we're trying to do. What is the one thing that you need to accomplish? And, what do you need my help on to get there? That will hopefully reinforce what you're already doing. And if not, you can calibrate a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and Jen, you're providing a great promo for our guest next week, who may be able to help people think about what some of those contributions might be for specific things. Next week, we have Dorothea Gosling joining us. She is an account-based marketing and strategy rock star, literal winner of Programs of the Year ROI awards from SiriusDecisions, and has been doing this work for a really long time and is now advising companies on how to do it. And what she's going to talk about next week, Jen, to your point about account planning, right, and being very specific about what you want to accomplish. A piece of that is deal-based marketing, which is basically saying, hey, I'm in a selling situation that's kind of must win for me. How can marketing and sales work together? And Dorothy is going to talk to us a little bit about how marketing can come to the table better prepared with some specific actions and ideas that may contribute to winning those very large deals that marketing and sales want to go all in on to really help hit those revenue numbers with the big accounts. So we're excited to have that. And Jen, oh my gosh, thank you so much for your amazing advice and insights. And we really appreciate you sharing them with us today.
It was wonderful to be here. Thanks so much, John and Meg, for having me.
Thank you, Jen. And we'll see you next week, same time.
All right. Happy Friday,
Take care.
everyone.